Welcome back to another episode of NFL News on the Boom Bust channel. I'm your host, Terry. And today, got a number of things to talk about. I've been trying to do this episode for like the last 5 or 6 days and just could not get myself to do it. But that's fine because we got more stuff to talk about, so we can knock it all out today. I was just in New Orleans, just got back. I know a lot of people are probably like, why didn't you stay for the weekend? Like, that's when all the stuff's happening. Trust me, look, I found that out the hard way. But that was never my plan. I booked it in the summer just to get ahead of time. My idea was to get out before all the madness. And now that I was there, I probably could have did it, but I was never going to the Super Bowl. That's just not how I want to watch it. So for me, it really was just about the atmosphere, and I still had a good time, man. There's a lot of good things happened. Then I went to the nightcap episode live, did that. So I was in the house for a lot of things. Ran by or talked to a lot of players, former players mostly. Different NFL people, all that good stuff. So it was definitely a whole thing, but I won't get too much into that. But it was I was just definitely down there. So anyway, moving on. There's a number of things I want to talk about, so it's just going to kind of be a hodgepodge, so bear with me. But the first thing I'm going to talk about, which is actually not in the NFL, but I'm going to talk about the Luka trade, and I've been wanting to talk about this. I mean, it absolutely rocked the entire sports world. Even if you're not an NBA fan necessarily, I think you probably know about this. So the Luka trade happened to me in real time. I don't remember what I was going to Twitter for, but I had hit Twitter 23 seconds after Sham had tweeted it, and it was at the top of my thing. And I looked at it, and I don't follow him, but obviously I know him. And I was just like, wait, what? I don't know what he's talking about. Like, I was genuinely confused. I was like, this could be any type of thing, that I'm not into. I don't know if it's games or if it's an internet thing, whatever. I'm like, but he ain't talking about like real basketball. AD for Luka. I know if this was like a 2K tournament or like if this was the All-Star game format. I know what it was, but I saw a couple people had mentioned it, so I text my brother immediately. I was like, and I don't know if he be up to date on the internet, but he follows the NBA pretty close. So I was like, Sham's got to be hacked. Just like everybody else. I was like, Sham got to be hacked, right? He was like, what you talking about? I don't know what he said. I said, go look at his tweet. By the time he did that, Sham's hacked was trending on Twitter. And so I was like, okay, I'm not the only one. So we all seeing this the same way. And then, of course, he said he's not hacked. This is the actual trade. So then, I mean, literally it stopped what everybody was doing. If you like are into it, it definitely did for me. I literally got off the phone with a friend to call my brother and talk to him about it. And we talked for hours trying to understand and wrap our head around it. Now, again, this would mean much more if I did it that night, but I didn't. But fine. If you don't believe me, that's fine. But I told my brother, I was like, the only thing that makes sense to me is that I remember hearing during the playoffs something to the effect of how the people in the front office aren't really happy how Luka conducts himself. I was like, but it was vague. I don't remember who said it and exactly what they said, but I just kind of remember that. I was like, that's the only thing I could really think of. And so now that we are removed and we got so many reports about it, we see that is the big thing. Now, I know, especially when you initially see it, that a lot of people are just like, this is ridiculous, this is crazy, to the point of either the Mavs are idiots or the NBA is, scripted, rigged, which again is stupid. But we're just going to do that about anything because, we live in a Trump society where we just make up stuff because we don't like the truth. So people were doing all that, man, where it's just like, and I get it because there's two things that's happening, and people, I would say, you have to realize that just because you don't agree with something doesn't mean that it's not logical, or doesn't mean that it's not logical to somebody else. And I think that was the hard thing that people were trying to come to terms with, because again, we live in a society of alternate news. So if it's something that I can't comprehend, well, then I got to fill in the blank and, make up all these other things. So it's got to be rigged. It's got to be scripted for the Lakers. It's got to be, whatever. Even though the Lakers have been terrible the last few years, it's scripted for the Lakers. So, and I get that because we've heard the news now, and there's two things that people can't come to terms with. People can't even come to terms with one thing by itself, let alone both of these together. Number one, the Mavs did not want Luka. That's a hard, I forgot the saying. That's something. That's a hard something to square. I don't know. You can say a hard pill to swallow. We could go with that one. That's just hard for people to really accept. Like, the Mavs, they didn't want Luka. And again, as I said, when my initial thoughts and what we've heard from the subsequent reports, that the Mavs, or at least this brass, because I didn't know Mark Cuban, he didn't sell the Mavs, but he not the majority owner or whatever he did. I didn't know nothing about that. I always put Mark Cuban as the Mavs owner. So whatever he did, this new group really just did not like how Luka act. They didn't feel he was the type of superstar that was, I wouldn't even say superstar. He wasn't that leader superstar. Not talent wise, but he just wasn't the type person that would be a leader to get this team to be at franchise level. That's what they felt. And a lot of people can't accept that. Now, to me, I don't agree with them necessarily, but at the same time, I don't agree with these people who are like totally dismissing this idea that Luka wasn't in shape, that Luka doesn't try as hard as he can to be a professional athlete. Like, people over here, like, the Mavs are making that up just as an excuse. I'm like, are you serious? Again, I don't agree with the Mavs to say that, hey, we'll trade this guy. But when you say, hey, one of our big concerns was we got to give a guy a supermax who has never been at peak physical condition, and he takes time in the season to get up to, conditioning, and he's had an injury history. I can understand that. Again, you can understand something and not agree with it. And it's hard for people to do that. And so I completely understand that. Like, watch the tape. The Mavs ain't making nothing up. Luka himself has said how he's been out of shape and how he ramps up. We've seen Luka drinking beer after a game. Like, we've seen all these things. And again, you might not agree with what it takes to be, that alpha type leader or that alpha type franchise player. That's fine, but you can't deny that what the Mavs are saying isn't true. And so I was like, okay. The second thing is, and probably the bigger thing is, they wanted AD because, again, a lot of people, myself included, especially that first night, was like, okay, you don't want Luka for whatever reason. Let's say we accept that. Why did you not get a better deal? And the answer is pretty simple because everyone keeps asking it. But again, it's just hard for them to accept. They wanted AD specifically. And so it wasn't about all the other packages they could have got. They wanted Anthony Davis, like, specifically, not another big, not another superstar. They wanted Anthony Davis. And so on top of that, once you do that, you give up all the leverage. Even if it's Luka, you give up all the leverage. Because if you call me to offer Luka, number one, that means you don't want him. So I'm already got leverage. And you called us specifically for AD, you're not shopping him around. Again, that means you want AD, that's leverage. The Lakers had all the leverage in this. And so the idea of, hey, why didn't they get this extra pick? Why didn't they get Austin Reeves? Like, to me, it still wouldn't make the deal any more believable. But still, the Lakers had all the leverage. It's a simple answer. And again, so as we are days and days removed, maybe a week removed from the trade, it's all laid out pretty simply, but we still got people that's like, I don't get it. Like, for me, it's still hard to wrap my mind around. It is crazy. But as far as the logic, it's been laid out for everybody. And so for those that are still like, oh my God, I don't get it. Like, it's all there. And again, it's hard for people to swallow. But the thing is that they didn't want Luka. They didn't want to bet on him as their franchise player. And they wanted AD specifically. Those are the two things that if you just don't accept, then yeah, you go down a conspiracy rabbit hole. But if you accept those two things, whether you agree or not, then you can kind of see how this trade happens so quickly. So that's that. It's a lot more I could say, but we got other stuff to get to. So moving to the NFL, sticking with trades, you got Myles Garrett requesting a trade officially, and I'm sure everybody understands putting out his little letter on social media and everything was a move. It was not a PR move, but a business move. It was a move to force more pressure onto the Browns, who had just recently said they're not trading him. Now, Myles Garrett also recently said that he thought that the Browns was closer than people thought, and he at some point also said that he was going to talk with the front office to see their thing, but he was putting on this company face as if he was going to move forward. So obviously that changed, but the Browns didn't change their mind. They said, we don't want to give him much. That makes sense. Even if you do want to give him up, you're going to say you don't so you can have the leverage in the trade. But either way, he put that out publicly to let other teams know it's a full green light. Try to come get me. Myles Garrett, to me, is undervalued, to be honest, and it goes to the discussion of the Cleveland Browns and why he wants to leave. So you are at a point, well, I wouldn't even say at a point. I should say this. This is not an indicator of a trend or anything. And that is something I want to say about the Luka thing, just to add on to it. I think that was an indication, as many said now, but I felt at the time, once you heard the Mavericks said that, hey, we're not trying to, it's not even a owner empowerment thing, because people like player empowerment versus owner empowerment, and I think there's definitely some to that. But I think really what it is this idea that we have to give a crazy amount of money and power, but money to these players, and we want to start, instead of, hey, you're really good and you're next up, so we're just going to give you the money. We want to pivot away from that and start saying, hey, we're going to be a little selective. Like, yeah, you're talented. Yeah, you may be all, and Luka's beyond all that. He's top 3, top 5. I get it. But in general, we're not just going to give the next young good player the keys to the franchise. And so if you're not the type of player that we want to be our franchise guy, then we're going to move on. So that did indicate a shift in the philosophy in the NBA. The Myles Garrett thing is not that. To me, the NFL has always been a mixture of players who prioritize money and individual success, and players that prioritize winning. And so I don't think Myles Garrett is new. We got other players like him. Obviously, because of his position in the NFL, it's a big name discussion, but I don't think, I look at trends and big picture. This to me doesn't indicate that. So Myles Garrett is a guy that really wants that success. And you can't blame him because I think he's underrated partially because of having to play for the Browns that don't compete for anything. Now, you also got a guy in your same division that you battle back and forth with as being the best at the position. Yes. But at the same time, I still think him not being on that big stage has kind of downplayed him a little bit because you just don't see the team a lot. You don't see him a lot. They don't talk about him as much. Because Myles Garrett is so like he's I put him over over Aaron Donald. Even though I love Aaron Donald as a player, but when you're talking about just in terms of just pure, I don't even know how to say it, like just pure eliteness. You look at Aaron Donald, who was productive, but still a little bit unassuming in terms of coming out of college to what he might be. Myles Garrett is not the first, but he's one of those guys that has been pure bona fide top of the line his entire time. And so you're talking about, and I honestly, I don't know. I want to make it up. I don't know if he was a 5-star recruit. That's not my world. But I'm assuming he was a big time recruit. You go to college, you're a big time star, presumptive number one pick, went number one pick, and completely lived up to every single expectation his entire time. And not only that, you look at him. I would say, no, you can't even say Mario Williams because he was an under the radar guy. But you just look at him, because there's thousands of stories of guys that are big and fast, explode, whatever it is. But you look at this guy, you say not only he was born to play football, he looks like he's born to play football. He works out and has the work ethic to build himself to play football. He's great at football. He goes to the next level. He's great there. He gets the award. He checks every box. And good dude and all that stuff too. No issues. Good leader. So I'm just like, to me, Myles Garrett has always been like top of the line to me. And because you got a TJ Watt, who's great, Aaron Donald, who's great, Chris Jones, all that, there's a bunch of debate, in sports media and sports conversations. But to me, there's no peak of eliteness like Myles Garrett in this era. So a guy like that wanting to go to a contender completely changes the thing. I mean, even a Von Miller, same thing. He wasn't at that top stature like that. Now, he was highly regarded coming out, but still, different questions, what he might be, how it might translate, his ramp up to being Von Miller that he was in the NFL. Good stuff, typical. But again, you had Myles Garrett at the top chair his whole entire career. But anyway, so we saw the impact that makes for a team. We saw the impact a lot of top flight players going to a contender can make. Saquon going to the Eagles. We've seen all that. But obviously this is a premium position who can impact the game single-handedly more so than a running back or anything like that besides a quarterback. But then also on top of that, once again, you get him with a contender. Then in the crunch time, you got really just an elite player that can put you over the hump in those situations. So him wanting to get traded, not surprising, but still massive news because of the potential of what might happen. I tend to, because again, he's under contract. He's not asked for more money. We've seen plenty of players recently ask for trades that didn't go nowhere. But I think this is different because this is about winning. And I do think that at the end of the day, whether it's the package that the Browns get offered, whether it's Myles Garrett just, pushing the issue, or whether it's the team just respecting a guy of his caliber and wanting to give him a chance to compete, the trade's going to get done. So the implications of this is massive. Obviously, we're about to see the Super Bowl and the champion this year, but going into next year, this is massive. And when he did it was even more interesting. It was smart of him not to wait. So I really think I know that this is going to impact the league hugely because not only was it, hey, I just want to get out of here, this is a dumpster fire, I want to go to a contender. So this is going to be massive implications going into next year. Me personally, just, tossing out when I first heard it, to me, Buffalo makes the most sense. So does Detroit. The difference is Detroit has a number of big time players they have to pay. They're also going through with coaching changes, so I still think with Dan Campbell, people will want to go there. They'll be considered a contender. But with the money issues, it makes Buffalo more of a. I mean, the fit, I think, is as good for either team, but I think Buffalo is more viable because of what they have on the books, or what they don't have, I should say. A lot of people saying Philly, which is weird. They're already in the Super Bowl, number one. But then number two, they're paying a lot of people. So I'm not sure how they're going to be able to get him. And they got players on the edge. I mean, besides the depth guys, you got Sweat and Nolan Smith, who is a second-year player who you expect to be that guy. Obviously, in Detroit, you would have a running mate with Aiden Hutchinson, but Buffalo, I don't think he needs a running mate. I think he'll be fine by himself. And so Buffalo just kind of seems like the natural fit where they got the ability to do that. But there's a handful of teams out there. Selfishly, I would love the Bears to get him, but there's a handful of teams out there that I think will be looking. I think he'll only be looking at the top contenders. I would even throw in the 49ers there. The thing about the 49ers is that at one point you said, hey, we're going to put the money into the D-line and we're going to roll with the guys in the middle. They were looking for edge guys for the longest time, so they said we're gonna put our eggs in the basket of Buckner and Armstead. Eventually, Buckner left. They did get Nick Bosa, who was one of the top edge rushers too, but then eventually Armstead is gone now too. So now you really just got nothing but Bosa. So I think bringing in Myles Garrett, really allows you not only to be a little lighter at the D tackle spot in terms of talent, but it allows you to potentially lose a Travarius Ward, who I think will leave because of the tragedy with his daughter. He don't wants to be in that city. And so I think it allows you to be a little lighter talent-wise in the secondary because it's going to elevate a Greenlaw. It's going to elevate a Warner. It's going to elevate whoever's in the secondary to have a Bosa and a Myles Garrett. And we know what the offense can do, and I think they for sure would be able to get back to the playoffs and make a run. So that's my thought on that. Cooper Kupp, that's a cap casualty. I'm not shocked. The way it kind of came out was interesting. His contract is, it's a big barrier, and that's something they want to get off the books. I get that. But that typically kind of happens organically. This idea of like, we're looking to trade you immediately made it seem like something happened. That was a little weird. But the Rams went to the playoffs. I expect Matt Stafford to be back, and as long as Stafford is back, I think that getting rid of Kupp, especially for what he did for you, doesn't have to be some top line priority, because no, he doesn't give you what he used to, which also means he's not going to give the new team what he used to. So it's not like it's not like we said we're ripping it off and ripping the roster down and we got to trade Puka and Nakua. Now, yeah, we'll get some big assets for them. You're not getting big assets for Cooper, especially with his contract. So to me, it would have made a lot more sense to either cut him or restructure his contract, or I should say restructure his contract or cut him and bring him back in a different deal. That would have made more sense to me. The way it was kind of put out was weird, so I get why people's ears perked up. But either way, I just think Cooper Kupp is, he's in the twilight of that career. He was never a super athlete. His injuries are starting to pile up. And so I think he'll be good for a number of different spots, depending on kind of what he's looking for. If he's trying to compete, trying to get it paid, trying to, play with a young quarterback, whatever it is, I think he'll be serviceable. But I think the reason this was kind of big news is just the way it was brought about. As if the Rams it was almost like Derek Carr, like, we got to get this guy out of here. Now, I don't think it's like that, but yeah, so we'll see. All right, let's talk about the MVP. The MVP, I'm sure a lot of people. I was at Nightcap. So if you watched the Nightcap episode when the crowd was yelling that Josh Allen won MVP, that's, same time I found out. And I'm sitting, like, I could touch the stage with my hand. So I was real close up there. So I found out about that. And I know there's a lot of discussion. There was discussion going into it. But number one, for those that don't know, the MVP votes are in before the playoff starts. So let's not do this whole thing about the playoffs and all that. Has no impact on anything. The votes are already in. Number two, this is most valuable player. And to be honest, I go back and forth with this, but here's my thing. If the all-pro, first all-pro, which is supposed to be the best, is like in other people's minds supposed to be the MVP, I don't understand why we have two awards. Because I still feel that we should go to the best of each position, best offensive lineman, or best quarterback, best running back. We should do that and get rid of MVP. But even if you did that, the best quarterback should just be the first team All-Pro and vice versa. So I just feel like, what's the point of having both? If we're going to get mad, which I do get, then just let it be the All-Pro team and that's it. We should have no other awards. But as it's constituted, the MVP is about value. Now, that's where we get into the sticky conversation, because quarterbacks are the most valuable position, and that's people's argument. So it's like, why would it not be a quarterback? Then it's, again, what's the point of the award? And on top of that, when you talk about valuable, people feel like, okay, if you take this person off team, none of these teams will be good. And so it's going to be close. It's never going to be like, hey, you take this quarterback off and the team's going to be just fine. No, we anybody in the MVP conversation, that's not the case. So you really got to split hairs. Statistically, better season was Lamar. We know that. But my thing is what you look at what they had to overcome in terms of value. Again, yes, every quarterback is valuable. Yes, Lamar is valuable to his team. Yes, the Ravens wouldn't be the same without him. I get it. But you still got to look at, everybody was saying, this team with Saquon, blah, blah, blah. And that's one of the frustrating things about any quarterback conversation. The Lamar one more so because it's always loud. But a team, fans will try to tell you why the team is so good when they want to talk about their team. But when they want to talk about the quarterback, then they want to be like, don't bring up the rest of the team. No, you're the one that said you got this stud running back and people can't stop that, and that enhances Lamar's ability. And that's always the issue. Football is the ultimate team sport. And when people want to make individual arguments, they have to cut down the team in order to prop the individual up. And that's why a lot of times none of this stuff, I would say it doesn't make sense, but it contradicts itself. So with that being said, at the end of the day, you have a Derrick Henry, you have an offensive line that's, bullying people. Defense was down, but even last year, defense was the best in the league, and he won MVP. So you got all these things, and if you want to call it a narrative, a context, whatever, that's fine. The narrative is Lamar has the best running back in the league added with his offense, and then the teams just kind of continue to build. Whereas Josh Allen's team got stripped down, was supposed to take a step back, and he has absolutely carried them every week. And so to me, in a world where you could say all pro is the best season by a quarterback, that's Lamar, but the most valuable to the team was Josh, I can see that. I can see that. And no, this is not me going against Lamar or whatever. I think it was a tough battle, and to be honest, I think Saquon should have been in there more discussion than he was, especially if they let him get the record. They should have. And even that's hard because if you want to argue Saquon, I would say look at all these other running backs that left the team that had great years with Philly. That O-line is a huge thing. But Saquon's talented too. All those could be true at once. But to me, I think that 3-horse race was super close. And again, as I said earlier, you might not agree with it, but that doesn't mean you can't see the logic behind it. And I can see the logic behind it. For me, it's tough as far as like who I would vote for, whatever. It's tough because I've always taken the MVP literally as most valuable. And so with that in mind, I look at all the positions, not just quarterback, not just potentially a running back. I look at defense, I look at all that. And so I would have to really go through it that way. But as far as Lamar versus Josh, I mean, I could go either way. I'll be honest with you. I go either way, and I understand that you say Josh was just carrying his team more than Lamar carried his team. And, you know, people want to argue that. It's fine. That, again, is more. It doesn't mean Lamar wasn't carrying his team, just that Josh did it more. All right, Hall of Fame. This is tough for me. We got 4 that went in. I don't really have no issue or want to make an argument about the people that went in. It's more about the structure. I remember Deion Sanders, Coach Prime, which was weird that he said this at Nightcap, that he was like, he's shocked that it was only 4. But I remember he said this when he was still at Jackson State or like right before. He said that the Hall of Fame let too many people in. And he said that it was not supposed to be the Hall of Very Good. Like, it should be very selective as far as who gets in. And I remember hearing that and agreeing. I'm like, okay. I mean, maybe not to the extent that he was saying, but I agree. It shouldn't be, hey, we have to fill a certain set number. And so I probably should have looked this up. I don't know. But there was a change in how they're structured the voting system. And so obviously they don't have to fill a certain number. And in the NFL, like I said, football and movies go real well together. So when you talk about the Hall of Fame, even awards, I start thinking of the Oscars. The Oscars, they got to a point where, you know, it was like, hey, we only got a handful of movies. Then it was like, hey, we got double that. But then they got to a place where it was like, we can go up to 10. That doesn't mean there's no guarantee there's going to be 10 every year, but we can go up to that. And so I think similarly with the Hall of Fame, it shouldn't be a quota of we have to have this number. I feel like it should be a world where the Hall of Fame says this year nobody gets in. And there should be a world where it says this year we're bringing in 8. Now, how you arrive to that voting process, that's what I get. That's where I kind of go back and forth. I don't know, and I'm curious what people think, because I heard Shannon Sharp say before that he feels like it should be you're in the Hall or you're not. Once your career is over and you reach the eligibility, they should be able to say yes or no. To me, I don't agree to that extent. I do think once you reach that level of 5 years retired, they should say you are Hall of Fame eligible. What those criteria, might be, I don't know. Especially with the different eras, it's hard to say. But you should be like, yes, you are in the realm. Like, who would I say? Let's say Rex Grossman. Once Rex Grossman retires 5 years, I think it's safe to say, hey, yeah, you're not in. But you're going to have to figure out some type of criteria to say that. So once you say, okay, yes, you're eligible, then I do think the ballots matter, because it's not just, hey, I'm straight in the Hall of Fame. I do think first ballot Hall of Famer and all that does matter. Now, should you be able to just sit around with no disrespect, because I think Sterling deserves it, but should you just be able to sit around 11, 12 years? Because, again, if you didn't watch Nightcap, I was sitting there when Sterling said this. He said a reporter asked him, like, are you going to thank God? Because it's cliche. And he basically said that Shannon said that one day they're going to be first brothers in the Hall of Fame. And he said since then he hasn't caught one pass, he hasn't got 1 yard or had one touchdown, and he goes in. And people was clapping, and I had to stop and think, like, does that make sense though? Like, what's different? And so I do think the ballots adds a level of, like, prestige to you getting in. But at the same time, I also feel like if you weren't worthy to get in that year, then why are you worthy to get in the next? Because that's the difference between the Oscars. You just don't win. You got nominated, but you just don't win. It ain't like next year, okay, let's talk about it. No. What you put out is what you put out. And if you competed in that group that year. And so I know it's not perfect apples to apples with movies and, the Hall of Fame, but I still just was wondering, like, does it make sense that, okay, nothing about your career has changed, but we're going to say you're a Hall of Fame now? So to me, in my mind, I think it has to be some type of limit. But I don't know that full structure. I'm curious what people think, and I think it's good points on both sides. All in all, I would say that I'm cool with them having 4. I'm okay with Eli not getting in. That was the big talk. But I would much rather the Hall of Fame start leaning towards being conservative than not. Even the idea of, like, we have to have one coach, one contributor, whatever, that's tough for me, because I get that's the only way that those guys could compete with a player in terms of getting in the Hall of Fame. But at the same time, I don't want a quota. And it could be up to 1. So we could say that. Maybe this year we're not putting somebody in. And so I don't know, man. I'm really back and forth on that. All right, last thing I'll wrap it up is the Super Bowl. Here's what I say. Like most years, there's a lot of, discussion. But I think the simple answer is the answer. Like, this is the Super Bowl. This is the best 2 teams. And it's going to be a good game. Much like last year. Hopefully it should be a good game. As far as matchups and talking about that, it should be a competitive game. As far as who's going to win and all that, look, I'm going to tell you this. I bet, especially Super Bowl, a lot of people bet, and I'll be going through tonight to look at bets, but I could tell you my number 1 bet, probably going to be my number 1 most reused bet, is going to be Philly plus probably 3.5, maybe 6.5, something like that. Because I don't want to bet against Pat Mahomes, but I really feel like in my soul the Eagles are going to win. And it's purely off the trenches. Because the Chiefs got a pretty good O-line, but we know that their talent is in the interior. Even though Thuney is playing left tackle, that takes away from the interior, helps the edge a little bit, but still, I think by a pretty decent margin, the D-line for the Eagles, based off explosion alone, I think gives them an edge. And then their O-line versus the Chiefs D-line is not even a question. That's the best O-line unit in the league, and they're pretty healthy, or hopefully should be. So to me, the trenches tilted way in favor of the Eagles, and that's just hard for a team to lose like that. I mean, even if you think about last year, as good as the offense was for the 49ers, their O-line has been in decline for years. And Chris Jones stepped up when he could or when he needed to, but this is a different caliber. And I think Chris Jones is going to get his, but this is a different caliber of O-line that where the rest of the D-line could be exploited. And so and then as I mentioned before, Armstead I think was there last year, but still, Bosa, you got him. You never got that other edge rusher. That D-line hasn't been as powerful as it's been in a while. And they went back and forth with the Chiefs. And really, a lot of times they kept the 49ers in it. So the Eagles have a better D-line overall. So it's hard for me to see the Eagles not have a great chance to win. So that's probably going to be my number one thing. But I will tell you, I don't have to, but I'm going to give my thoughts on the Super Bowl. My thoughts are very much the Eagles are going to make a lot of big plays in the first half, go into the half up possibly 10 or more, and then there's going to be a crucial mistake. I don't even think it's necessarily going to be Jalen Hurts just because that's the bruhs, root to the good bruhs. I don't think it's necessarily going to be Jalen Hurts turning the ball over. It might be Atlanta Falcons being too conservative. Now, I wouldn't say too conservative because you got the tush push, you got Saquon. I think it'll come down to the Chiefs getting in striking distance, the Eagles not being able to sustain a drive in a moment where you think they're going to convert, and the Chiefs getting one last shot and Pat Mahomes polishing them off like he's done many times. That's how I think it's going to go. But still in that scenario, I'm taking Eagles with a plus in the spread, and I think I think Eagles plus anything 3.5 and above is going to be good stuff. That's my thoughts. So, all right, that's it for me. Go down comment section. Let me know what you think. Share around, get the conversation started. Thumbs up, subscribe, and thank you for listening.